Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Hale. I'm the CEO of Victory, which owns GI Jobs. I would like to welcome you to the November 2021 version of the GI Jobs Virtual Career Expo. I wish you great success networking today with employers who have come here today to help you get hired into a great civilian job. You have arrived at the kickoff keynote address, and you've made a good choice being here because all GI Jobs does is bring you A-listers. That's what we do. And this month is no different. Why do we bring you A-listers? Because a big part of being successful in the private sector is surrounding yourself with and learning from those who have been highly successful. So be inspired today. Today, and he's giggling, but he is one, I am pleased to be joined by A-lister, Dr. Paul Lawrence. Let me give you a little bit of background on Paul. First of all, he's one of our own. Paul is an Army veteran and an airborne qualified captain. Education, impressive. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Massachusetts in economics and a master's and a PhD, in economics from Virginia Tech. So he's a Hokie, but he's a really, really smart Hokie. Work experience. This is even more impressive. After leaving the military, Paul served in leadership and executive roles in some of the biggest blue chip firms in the country. PricewaterhouseCoopers, IBM, the MITRE Corporation, Accenture, and E&Y. And all of this led to the experience helping really, really big organizations, complex organizations, figure out how to do better performance, improve performance, and manage better. And this led to his appointment as the VA Undersecretary for Benefits that he served in from 2018 until 2021. Let me put that into a little perspective for some of the folks attending today. If you're like me, when you left the military, you had heard of the VA, you kind of knew generally what they did, but you didn't know kind of how they were structured. VA has basically three very large divisions underneath it. The first one is that many folks are familiar with is VHA, which is like the fourth largest healthcare provider in the United States, the Veterans Health Administration. The second is VA Cemetery, which operates 131 national cemeteries. And the division that Paul headed up was the Veterans Benefit Administration. So all of the GI Bill benefits, the home loan guarantees, vocational rehab, disability compensation and pension, as well as other types of insurance go through VBA. It's a gigantic organization, I think 25,000 employees, and Paul led that. Paul's also the author of several books, including the recently released Transforming Service to Veterans, which I've got here. And I can tell you that Paul is definitely a doctor, not a medical doctor, PhD, but he writes like a medical doctor. I've got my own copy here, which he was kind enough to sign. And if you all can read what that says, let me know. No, I can read it, actually. It's good. It was very nice, Paul. I can tell you firsthand that as a veteran that uses VA services, that his leadership was instrumental in changing the way VA operates. He brought leading best practices to the VA. It resulted in a massive focus on performance improvement. He was part of a real big initiative to create more transparency and public presence within VA. And he did a phenomenal job in that role. There's really no better missionary for the VA than Paul Lawrence. And he also is no stranger to GI Jobs, having been published in GI Jobs magazine numerous times. So without any further ado, I give you, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Paul Lawrence.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate you inviting me here today. And I want to congratulate you too on the 20th anniversary of GI Jobs, and also give a shout out to Dan Fazio, because I know he and I have interacted throughout our time together. I also want to thank, your sponsors too, because I know things like this don't happen without sponsors. And when I was looking at the list of sponsors, I really thought it talked about the range of opportunities that are open to veterans. I saw Oracle, think about high-tech companies, Geico, great customer service, but even the range was broad, right? 84 Lumber, J-Dog, and helmets to hard hats. Kind of really pointing out all the opportunities that are available to veterans based on their wide range of experience and interest. So it's really great to know. So I know with this virtual career expo, your goal is to provide tips, give tools, coaching, connect employers, but it is not just for veterans to get a job. It's really to help them get great careers. So what I thought I would try to do in my remarks today is be as helpful as possible by talking about several points in my career that I thought were key and what that can translate to in terms of tips for veterans who are either transitioning or want a better job. So let me go through just 3 of these. The first key event in my career I think was really important was joining the Army. I joined the Army through ROTC coming out of my undergraduate work, as Chris pointed out. But I grew up in a military family. My father was a career Army officer. We traveled the whole world, moved a lot. He was in Korea and Vietnam, and he left us in 2000. Now he's in Arlington Cemetery. My mother, was a large family, 5 brothers that fought in World War II, one of which was killed in Normandy. That's my middle name. And family events, they would talk about their time in service. So when you say, how did it really happen? Well, we never really talked about being patriotic, but I guess we were. My father was in the Army, so I assumed I would do Army ROTC, and I did. And so I served for 3 years. My experience was sort of funny. I went to school, got commissioned, then I delayed going in so I go get my graduate work, as Chris described, and then I eventually joined, and I was in the finance corps. But what I learned in the military, and this is why I think the experience is so powerful, and the one thing I would talk to veterans about is often you don't realize how powerful the experience is and what a great asset it is. I mean, everyone knows the military as essentially a leadership laboratory. You leave the military, and by definition, you've gotten leadership skills that many in civilian life will never, ever have, right? And private sector needs more leaders. Everybody will tell you that. So you come out with great experiences. It's impossible in the military not to be a good manager, or at least learn how to manage. It's impossible not to know how to deal with people, or to get things done, or to deal with ambiguity, or to demonstrate loyalty, or to follow the rules. These are powerful assets. And I just can't think of how many times, I dealt with people and said, let's go do this. And you'd have people with no military experience go, well, I got a 4.0 from this great university. Why do we have to do this? Can we talk about it? If military folks understand the mission, and this is a really powerful asset. Now, what's sort of ironic is in the finance corps and when I served, what was transition to the civilian life? It was essentially I was mailed my DD 214 and that was it. So I know people talk about transition assistance now and how it could be better, but compared to what I experienced it was just very, very different. So what did I do to get a job? I went to the phone book, found companies that I thought would employ economists, and I mailed them. That's right, old-fashioned mail. I mailed them resumes and hoped that they would call me and get interviews. And so I did. And one of the things I learned along the way, and this is one of the tips I'll offer, was one of the first people to interview me was a veteran himself. And he talked about, listen, you might not come to work for our company, but I want you to know everybody understands what it is to leave the military. And this is the time where veterans will want to help you the most. And it was very powerful because I didn't go to work there, but he gave me great advice about where I should work and what I should think about. So my first tip to veterans would be, understand that other veterans are there to help you and they are anxious to help you. And often veterans who are transitioning either for the first time or through their career don't ask enough. I started having a presence on LinkedIn, on social media, and talking a lot about veterans helping veterans, using the hashtag VHV, veterans helping veterans, to encourage folks to identify that they will answer questions to other veterans who need assistance. And what I found is really amazing things. I found that you can get veterans discounts from virtually any company simply by asking. I found an organization that will pay veterans who are struggling with utility bills. They're going to be evicted. They will give them money. And they do this. They raise money without doing a lot of things. And it's really amazing. I've found groups that will give advice or coaching for free. Last weekend, I spent time with a group called Links to Freedom. They offer golf lessons to veterans who are wounded, disabled, and I mean seriously. So and I just learned recently of a group that's taking veterans on Veterans Day for 2 days to go fishing, all for free, so they can have camaraderie and do these kind of things. So there's a lot of opportunities to get advice, camaraderie, connectivity. Most of these groups, you can find them on social media, all want help. They all want volunteers. And finally, we often see veterans talking about, I miss the days back when I was in my unit, the tight-knit feel of that. There are other groups out there who will do things like this. So I encourage you to really reach out and pay attention to that. The second tip I would offer is one that I experienced, which is, finding a great job. After I got out of the military, I moved to the Washington, D.C. area, and I ended up working for, as Chris pointed out, consulting companies where I did work in and around the federal government, where I worked with federal leaders, did different things, saw different styles. And what I did was I learned a lot about myself. And what I discovered was I was really a process person, an operational person. I'm not a policy wonk where I wanted to sit at all meetings all day. I wanted to go do things. And so I did some work as a consultant for the US Postal Service, and I learned about processing mail. I did some work in the housing industry, and I learned about housing finance. I did some work in education, and I learned about how student loans were processed, and I even had a chance to work in an insurance company. So in 2017, when someone called me and said, they have this job called Undersecretary of Benefits, which you actually have to interview for, it's written by law. Will you send your resume in? I was happy to comply with my friend because I said, sure, great friend, happy to do that. I imagine they get thousands of resumes and who knows if I'd ever hear from anything. But as I assembled my resume, I realized much of my experience was very similar. Processing loans, I'd learned about processing. Housing finance, the GI Bill, education, I had learned about all these things. So I thought, this is interesting. So the time came, they actually called me in to interview, and I was lucky enough to be selected. And I said, well, listen, I'm going to prepare, but I don't have to prepare that much because my story is going to be my story because I understand this work. I'm going to tell them I'm a veteran, so I'm clearly passionate about veterans issues. I know what goes on here. And if you give me this job, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend all my energy pursuing world-class service for veterans. So because I understood who I was and what the job was, I could see the immediate connection. So my second tip for veterans, especially as they transition, is know what you're capable of and what you want to do. Anyone can find a job, right? You can get a good job, but the question is, are you going to get a great job? You need to take an inventory of your experiences and interests and find out if they match to what you're going to end up doing. And here's what's really interesting about this. If you do this and you do this well, interviewing changes. Instead of you going, here I am, you have a job for me, you show up and say, this is what I want to do. Do you have one of those? You're interviewing them. Okay, you're searching their company or their group to see if they have what you want to do because you know what you're good at and what you can do. It's a very different conversation and really enables, I believe, a higher likelihood of getting a great job. And because you're so efficient at doing that, you can spend time, something I think a lot about is getting a great boss, interviewing the person to see if he or she will be a great boss, because I believe strongly you can't have a great job without a great boss. So again, know what you want to do and see if they have it for you. The final thing I learned about through my career is what I call pursuing excellence in work. I think, and this was my experience, that if I was passionate about something, it was very likely that I would do it very, very well. Now you ask yourself, well, what are you passionate about? And it's hard to explain, but I'll offer what I call my sports theory about being passionate. If you have an interest in your life, perhaps it's sports, a hobby, or something like that, you look at that and you'll say, I know a lot about that, but I have never, ever taken a course on that. I have never, ever attended a class on that. Yet I've acquired knowledge along the way rather easily. So for example, I'm a big Boston Red Sox fan. I don't know how this started. I just know all this thing about them, their history and whatever. In fact, once my son really embarrassed me in middle school and he said, can you tell me the starting lineup of the Boston Red Sox? And I said, yes. And he goes, do you know my teachers? And I quote, could not, right? So passion is sort of building knowledge because it really interests you. And if you can find what you're passionate about at work, I think you'll see what'll happen is you'll be really, really good at it. So again, back to my experiences as the undersecretary. I got there, it's a great job. You do lots of cool things. You ride around in a limo and stuff like that. And, the hours are long. It is a pay cut, but you don't come to government at this level for the pay. And so you're sitting there going, well, I can kind of stand on the sidelines and kind of float along here. And it's a pretty cool job. or I can really get involved. And it was what I thought about when I came there, which is how much longer can I, complain about somebody else and not really get involved. So early on in my time there, had a difficult experience implementing the Comeri Act, the Forever GI Bill. And I sat there after a very difficult hearing thinking, well, I can get really good at defense, explaining I haven't been here, I didn't write this law, I didn't do this, or I can, get my hands dirty, hunker down on this, and really be passionate about what we're going to do. And instead of just being satisfied with being okay or not getting yelled at, say, let's be really, really good at this. Let's actually deliver service to veterans as if we wanted it to be really, really good. Let's not be embarrassed about being accountable, about being transparent and improving performance. Let's embrace being good, and let's devote all our energy to really, really serving veterans. I was not surprised that others wanted to be really good. They were anxious not to be seen as the laughing stock of VA. Nothing works there, when in fact, many things work really well. Some things needed to work better. So I encourage everybody to find their passion at work. If you find your passion at work, you will be very, very good at this. You might not get it exactly right. Veterans change jobs regularly, especially when they come out. I changed jobs 3 times in my first 5 years when I first left the military. I thought I had it right, but it didn't take me till the 3rd time to really get it right. So I understand that. So you might say, well, what can I be passionate about? And I'll offer some suggestions. Here's a place to start. Everybody, listening today, watching today, is passionate about veterans issues. Most organizations, though surprisingly not all, have a veterans group, a veterans resource group, a veterans affinity group, some group of veterans. Get involved with that group. And if you don't have one, that's a good thing to start, okay? Because these groups need to work together to help veterans, like I've been talking about. And often, if the groups do exist, they're rather social in nature. Back in the day, it would have been to hold happy hours. But get involved and get them to help veterans. So here's 2 suggestions that what you could do together. On December 18th, Wreaths Across America will lay wreaths on all the cemeteries they can possibly find to do that. Here in Arlington Cemetery, 50,000 people will go and do this. You can get your veterans resource group to go do that. Build passion for veterans' interests. The second thing you can do is work on veteran homelessness. Instead of going out carousing one night, go out as a group, tour your city. When you see somebody you think is a veteran who's homeless, call this number, 877-424-3838. That's the veteran homeless hotline at the VA. They will send somebody to give them the location, determine if that's a veteran and whether he or she can get resources. So these are things you can do in your company to build passion for veterans issues. And I'd urge you to do this because it's very, very important. Because if we want companies and organizations to pay attention to veterans, we've got to organize and do things. So for example, you walk into HR and say, I'm a veteran, you should hire more veterans. I think that'd be good. They'll give you, yeah, I hear you. Thanks a lot for that. But if you go in and say, I'm part of your veterans resource group, there are 75 of us. There are 100. There are 1,000 of us. And we do these awesomely good things like Wreaths Across America. And we think you should hire more veterans or do things for veterans in this work. You will get tremendous attention. So again, what you're passionate about, it can start with your veterans resource group, but I urge you to think about that. So let me just close on a couple points here that have to do with my last job, about something about the benefits you've earned and how that can help you throughout your life. Again, transitioning for the first time or throughout your career. I'd point out 2 powerful benefits. One is the GI Bill education benefit. Now, I know you might say, I've been to 4 years of college, I know that, or I don't want to go to 4 years of college. It is so much more than what you think if you haven't been paying attention to it. Virtually everybody comes to Congress and wants to expand the GI Bill or make it better. So now it includes many, many more things. High-tech apprenticeships, old school apprenticeships. You can reuse it for what I once would have called the trades, but now I call really expensive, really well-paying jobs. Medical technicians, dental technicians. Call somebody to your house, electrician, plumber. You can use this for really good stuff. So if you're in the service after January 1st, 2013, it's the forever GI Bill now, so you can use it and you should think about using it, even if you haven't really thought about going back to school or the like. The second thing is, don't forget the home loan guarantee. This is one of the coolest benefits for veterans, the ability to buy a home with no money down. Okay, this is a powerful thing, especially during this period of time when interest rates are so low. So think about that. Some of the most clever veterans I've met used the home loan guarantee, bought a house, built up equity in the house, used that equity to finance their business, to start a business and then hire more veterans. So between the education benefit and the home loan guarantee, these are powerful benefits that can help your transition. So, and I believe that military service should accelerate a veteran's pursuit of the American dream. Just think about that, right? A civilian will go to college and most likely have an education debt coming out of that. A veteran will not if they use the GI Bill right. A civilian will struggle to save for the down payment to buy a home, probably delaying home ownership a while. A veteran can do it once they leave with their DD-214 that says honorable discharge on it. This gives you a leg up of the civilian world, right? You've demonstrated the responsibilities of citizenship by serving. Now you get some of the rights that you've earned. So I think these are really, really important. And I would remind you just in closing, we're all part of this incredibly strong community called the veteran community. We should be here to help each other, embrace it, feel comfortable doing it. Join me on social media, see what you can do, engage in the conversation, because there's so much we can do to help other veterans, especially as we think about, Veterans Day just a week or so ago. So again, thank you, Chris, for letting me be here today. I hope the group finds that helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. It was great. Hey guys, if you haven't done this already, or if you haven't seen Paul on social media, I follow him on LinkedIn. I encourage you to do that. He's always got some really great information, whether it's career advice like you heard here today, or whether it's different ways to access your benefits. Really good stuff. So Paul, thank you very much. Do you have time for just a couple of questions?
Sure, happy to help out.
Sure. One of the things that we see here at GI Jobs is that veterans oftentimes go into what we call these soft landing jobs. And what I mean by that is whatever job the military put you into when you were 17, 18, 19 years old, oftentimes, not really best equipped to understand what it is, to do the interest inventory and understand what you want your life's work to be at that tender age. And the jobs that you were put into were largely based on, the needs of the military. So one thing we've seen is that veterans tend to go into these soft landing jobs, whether it's going to work for a company that manufactures the equipment that they used while they were in the military, for example, or taking a government service job that's similar to the one that they were performing in the military. And that's great if that is their life's passion. But we've seen oftentimes they miss out on finding out what their life's passion is, because they're adults at this point. They've got obligations, financial obligations. Maybe they're married, maybe they've got kids, they've got mortgage payments. And so they take these soft landing jobs that are a little bit more secure. And sometimes when they fail to figure out what their life's passion is. Any thoughts or advice around those decision points?
Sure. When I think about transition and people sort of getting out, one of the advice I give folks is start way early, right? If you just decide a month before you're out what you're going to do, the soft landing jobs look really attractive because you'd like to get a paycheck. So the best practice I've seen is people start early and really find out what's available. And it's so much different now between the internet as well as just the ability to talk to people. You can find out what is out there. So I don't know that if you take a soft job, you really thought hard about what else is out there. Okay. Taking the inventory of yourself is very hard, when you're less experienced. What do I want to do? I don't know. Talking to people helps, but you should try to do that. Some of it is just understanding that if you take a soft job at first, like I said, I went through a couple. I didn't think they were soft before I really found what I wanted to do. Be prepared and understand that you may very well end up changing jobs. Back in the day, you changed jobs, something was wrong with you. Now people understand we do change jobs rather regularly. So I would say you do take a soft job and you find, I'm deferring to security now. I have a family, I've got to care about that. But you do need to continue to be looking, because one of the things that I found is most frustrating is people do take the soft job. They wake up 10 years later and say, I've really cut my options going forward. And now the company is thinking about laying me off, or now the company isn't as exciting as I want. I've really precluded better options. So by stopping to invest in yourself, you really do limit yourself, if not immediately, in the long term. So, hopefully there's the internal thing talking to them, Chris, and the examples you're giving, saying, I want so much more. I want something different, and that they will listen to that and do whatever it takes, find more opportunities even in their company, or use things like the GI Bill to get additional training. I mean, there are short-term things you can do to augment skills that will better position you.
Yeah, no, good stuff. Thank you. One of the things that we often also see at GI Jobs is veterans asking us, what's the biggest difference, right, in the military and the private sector, sort of culturally? We say things like, well, in the military, you kind of know where everybody's rank is because they wear it on their collar device, and in civilian private sector, everybody looks the same and dresses the same. But the other one is around resource usage. I'll give you an example. I was a P3 Navy flight officer, and when I came back from our missions, which was sort of anti-submarine warfare, it was always, did you accomplish the mission? Did you stay tracking the submarine? Did you lose contact, right? And the second one was there any loss of life, or did the equipment malfunction? And if those two were up checks, right, and those were largely binary, then the mission was considered a success. Never once did they ask me, well, how many sonobuoys did you deploy, right, when you were out there hunting that submarine? And we'd use 100 at a time, right, in a 3-hour mission, only to find out years later that these things cost thousands of dollars a piece, right? In the private sector, it's very different, right? In the private sector, it's all about efficiency. It's all about process improvement to maximize the efficiency because of the competitive nature, which is another thing that doesn't really exist in the military. You've always got other companies that are trying to do it bigger, faster, stronger, more efficiently. You're an efficiency and a process expert, right? Self-professed. What kind of advice would you give to veterans sort of moving into a culture where those KPIs, those key performance indicators, are going to be around things like, efficient use of resources, for example?
Sure. It's probably just understanding and having more awareness for the resource constraints. So I don't think these are new to veterans, right? All veterans have a checkbook. They have to balance the checkbook every month, or they have resource constraints. So it's probably encouraging them to ask more questions. When you get a mission or a project or whatever in the private sector, ask, what are the constraints? If there's time constraints, we need to have this done within 2 months, 4 months, right away. And there are resource and people constraints. How many people can I enlist? Who can help, and the like? So I would probably say my strongest bit of observation is that, just be aware of those. There are some times when, very much like the time you talked about in the Navy, where it's like, this is a big problem. There are no constraints. Enlist everything, do as fast as you can. Other time there are constraints. I can only give you a couple of people to help you. It's got to be done in a month. People will talk about that more openly in the private sector because they just understand it. I don't think the language is hard to understand if you're a veteran, but it's just different. When you did those things you described in the Navy, you didn't know it at first. Someone had to train you and teach you, and probably you got better over time. The same thing is true in the private sector. It's not an unlearnable language. It just takes some discipline to learn.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you. One more question, and then we'll wrap up here if you've got time, Paul.
Absolutely.
A lot of veterans are seeking leadership roles in the private sector. One definition of leadership is simply managing change, right, in an organization, and that's different regarding, depending on the size of the organization. In your career, you've done a lot of that, right? And most recently, as the Undersecretary of the Veterans Benefit Administration. So we get questions around, from veterans around what is the difference, what are some of the leadership differences between the military and how leadership is done in the private sector, and what are some of the similarities? Can you comment on that?
Sure. Some of the differences are, your ability to order people around is really constrained and should be used very reluctantly. It's much more about persuading folks as to why this is a better idea and why we need their help. So you'll use more of those persuasive skills and give very few orders directly. So you're going to have to learn things about that. Some of the similarities are team focus, mission focus, right? You describe a mission in terms of warfare, but missions in terms of working together, certain things have to be done and the like. So those are not unusual. In terms of change, I mean, the best way to sort of talk about change is having demonstrated it in your own life, and that's a pretty good indicator that you would be a good leader of change, right? So you left the military, you went and did other things. You've experienced change that many in the private sector will not. They often live in the same neighborhood their whole lives and do the same things. And so talking about that, and again, you just think about, rotating in and out of different units, dealing with different groups, people, being able to talk about personal change puts you in a good position. Now, I will say, one of the things that I think I see a lot of veterans kind of working through is, I had a really cool job in the military. I expect an equally cool job in the private sector. That may not often translate initially, but you can earn your way there. Okay. And the private sector companies take a little while to discover your skills and abilities. Don't be surprised that you can move through the ranks faster than you could in the military, right? It's rather structured, but you might show up and say, I'm feeling like I should have been at a higher level here. If it's a good company, they're going to discover, your talents, and you are going to move to the higher level. So don't be initially discouraged if you go, wait a minute, I left, I was in charge of so many people and so much money and so many resources. It often doesn't translate, but you'll be surprised the need for people who can lead at that level and the scarcity of leadership thing. And I remember once, and I'll close on this thing I learned a long time ago, back in the day when Pepsi-Cola was just a rock star firm, and they were, the market loved them, everybody loved them. They asked the CEO, how is it your company's doing so well? And the CEO said, it's clear, we have more leaders at every level than our competitors. So companies know the importance of leadership. That's why I continue to believe being a veteran, having served in the military, is such a powerful asset that we just often don't realize.
I'm really glad you brought up the point around veterans feeling as though maybe they should be brought in at higher levels in the organization than oftentimes they are, at least that first job. Because I think you can choose one of two paths. You can either choose the path that you recommended, which is, I'll be discovered, so to speak, and the skills that I learned in the military will help me accelerate faster. But the other one is to get angry about it, right? And that doesn't do anybody any good, and feeling as though you should be in that higher position. So I'm really glad you brought that up. That comes up quite a bit. We see that a lot.
Yeah, and just so you know, just to close on that point, when people ask me at a company level, how are we doing? Are we military friendly? Well, one of the things I ask them is say, okay, how do you treat veterans when they show up? And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, you send these people who have these incredible physical experience to outward bound like everybody else, where they rappel for a half an hour, not realizing what they've done. And also, are you prepared to move them through the ranks faster once you discover their skills and once you discover what they really learn and know? So I challenge them all the time to demonstrate that.
Yeah, great points. Great points. Cannot thank you enough for spending time with our folks here today in attendance at the Virtual Career Expo. Best of wishes, and we look forward to seeing great things from the rest of your career, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and an equal shout out to you for what you do at GI Jobs, go-to publication for all things veterans.
Thank you, Paul. Take care.
Thank you.